That's all good. Well, let's take it back to your playing career in Australia here, and we'll talk about some of the bands and people you worked with here. We'll start off with Col Nolan. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You first met or worked with Col with a group called the Soul Syndicate. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right. Okay. So how did this relationship with Col come about and getting involved with this group?
Well, I'd been playing around a year, 1967.
Yep.
I'd sort of been playing professionally for about a year at that stage, and when I joined Col, it was about 1968. So, I mean, the scene wasn't like it is now, where there's a million people and you don't know even who they are. Half of them are. You knew most of the players. You knew, and if there was anyone new in town, you knew. So, I guess I knew about Col, and he would have heard about me from someone or other. I don't know. So anyway, I just got the call from him to see if I wanted to do the gig. It was at the Whiskey A Go Go, which was a sort of a club in William Street, King's Cross.
Oh, okay.
And it was a place where servicemen that were on R&R from America used to come here, sailors and whatever, and used to come and on R&R and go down to the clubs. It was a wild place, disco go-go girls,
right?
On poles and all, and go-go girls and all that stuff. It was amazing. It was I think we had the gig for about 3 or 4 nights a week or something. It was
Wow.
And so the band was John Sangster on drums, and John Allen, a guy called John Allen on bass, and myself on saxophone, and Col on organ. And we played soul, sort of, the music of that time. In 1968 there was a lot of fusion of rock and jazz and soul music, and that sort of stuff was the popular music of the time. Bebop had sort of kind of gone out for the time being. It had sort of not gone out, but it was there was less of it.
Yeah, right.
The new jazz was starting to happen, and people were fusing music together and that sort of stuff. So we did that, and I did my first album on saxophone with Col Nolan on an album called Whatever It's Worth, which has just been re-released.
Oh wow!
Yeah. I listened to it. I think I wish I could do that again. But anyway, because I'd only been playing about a year, so I was still developing.
Fair enough. And was that all your own charts on that, or?
No, but they were all sort of tunes of, some. I wrote one tune.
Yeah.
For it. Col wrote one. I think John Sanctor wrote one, and the rest were things like Sunny.
Oh, okay.
Ode to Billy Joe, and it's full of the green grass of home, and sort of like pop things, and it's a bit of a mixture of everything. When you're playing to an audience, you need a sort of pretty wide variety of kind of tunes, especially when it's that sort of venue. It's not a jazz type venue. People are talking and stuff. And people were listening too. We had a listening audience, but it was. You're not like a jazz club like, SEMA or the Foundry or something where people just sit and listen. That sort of venue.
And what other sort of performance opportunities did you do with Col down the track after?
It was pretty much that, and pretty much that gig and the album.
Right.
And then, of course, the Daly-Wilson Big Band was around that time too. So I joined the Daly-Wilson Band pretty much all at the same time.
Right.
So I was writing for Channel 9. I was doing Col Nolan. I was doing a whole bunch of things at once.
I see. There's a bit of a pattern with you. You always seem to do everything in major bursts. And
I think then, something, I think it was that there was just so much going on then. I mean, people can't really comprehend when a student asked me what was it like in the 70s and 80s for studio work, they can't conceive that you were doing like 3 calls a day, studio calls, 3 a day, every day, 2 big bands at the same time.
Yep.
In the studios. Probably doesn't happen very much now. If it does, it's probably every now and again.
Yeah.
I don't know how. I'm not in touch with how much recording's going on now. There's still recording, I know, but then it was ridiculous, and so there were gigs every night. There were recording sessions every day. There were artists coming out here all the time from overseas. There was so much going on. So I suppose that's why there were a lot of things at once. Of course, you weren't just in one thing. You didn't just put your eggs in one basket. You know, you were doing all these things. So that's probably why. I suppose it's like it is. But yeah, it's funny. It's a coincidence that a lot was happening. But I think a lot was happening then. It was a different world.
Yeah.
You know, a musician was quite well off then. You know, financially, you could make a lot of money just playing. You didn't have to teach. You didn't have to do anything else. You didn't have to supplement it with anything else. It was just playing your instrument. And even if you had an instrument, you'd be working. It was that sort of, there was work.
Yeah,
there were grades of work where there were a lot of clubs and, RSL club, all the clubs had bands and, there was so much going on. So I suppose that's why there was a lot of stuff happening. There was live television and there were bands in television and, and all that stuff. And now it's all reality shows and, that sort of stuff. We don't have much in the way of, musicians playing in live situations. It's mainly the jazz clubs and whatever else is going on. There are things,
All right, we'll sort of continue on talking about your performance career. You mentioned your work with the Daly-Wilson Big Band. Now, for those who don't know, this is quite a prolific big band from Sydney, which is quite famous back in the day, and you were one of the founding members, I understand.
Yeah, the band formed at a place called the Stage Club, which was opposite 505 on the other side of the road.
Really?
Sort of up a bit. Yeah, it's not there anymore.
Okay.
And it was, I think the Stage Club was obviously some sort of club that was for actors or something, I suppose. I don't know. I can't remember what it actually was used for, but we used to rehearse there. And that's where we started. And I knew Warren Daly. Warren Daly was a rock and roller.
Right.
Yeah, he was a rock and roller too. So he come from the rock thing like I did, from that sort of area and moved through to the jazz thing. And so he played with a band with Warren Williams, and the Steeds was one of his bands, the early bands. And then he was an amazing drummer. He always was. He was a virtuoso even at that stage. So Warren and Ed Wilson, it was their brainchild to put the band together. And then so they assembled the guys. So I was in the very, very first lineup of it. And we used to rehearse, and that was sort of around the same time, 1968, about the same time that I joined Col Nolan's band. So that's why I was doing that as well.
Yeah.
So rehearsing in that, and then we did our first gig at the Sage Club. I think that was where we first did the first gig, and it was fantastic. The band was very rehearsed. Warren was a real sticker for rehearsing, and so was Ed, and really getting things tight. It was a great band. It was all the really good guys in it. Tony Buchanan was in it. I don't know if you know Tony, baritone, and a guy called Doug Foskett, who was lead alto. I think Graham Lyle might have played lead alto for a while too.
Okay.
Then Doug Foskett, and there were a lot of the guys from that period were in there. Very good band, really good trumpets and good trombones, and excellent rhythm section. Col played with the band too, Col Nolan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the early ones, and I recorded a couple of albums with that band, with the Daly-Wilson Band. The first one we did was live, an album called Live at the Cell Block, which was an excellent recording.
Okay.
I haven't got a copy of it. I've lost it. I don't know. It's gone, and I wish I had it. It doesn't exist anymore, but I wish I could hear it. But it was great. And then I did. I think it was their second or third album, and then I joined Ayres Rock. So that's, otherwise I probably would have played with them longer.
Okay. So how long in total were you there for?
Daly-Wilson, I suppose from 68 to 71, or about 3 years or so.
Okay.
Yeah, we did a lot of gigs, a lot of different gigs, and we were sponsored by WD and HO Wills, the tobacco people. Yeah, they were the sponsors for Daly-Wilson Big Band.
No,
it was an excellent band, and fantastic, very exciting band, and I played the first tenor book, so I got lots of solos and learned to play the altissimo register. You had to. It was loud. So I learned to play the altissimo register from wiggling my fingers and finding the harmonic series. Yeah, I didn't have any fingering, so I just played anything and it'd come out. That was it. Often you'd go out the front and the band was really loud, and so to get over the top of it, you'd scream away on some harmonics. And so that was my first introduction to harmonics.
Crash course. And what kind of music would you play in the Daly-Wilson Band? Was it like a mixture of standards, or was it some original stuff of Ed's?
There was original material.
Yep.
Ed Wilson wrote some tunes of pretty novel ones. One called not Timey Kangaroo. What, that was Rolf Harris. Oh God. What is it called? Oh geez, it's something about kangaroo. I can't remember it now. But,
okay.
I can't remember. But yeah, Ed wrote a lot of the charts.
Mm-hmm.
He did a lot of the. He composed a few. There were a few arrangers. I did some arrangements for it. I think George Broadbeck did. It was a mixture of stuff. We did, there were popular tunes of the day, like MacArthur Park.
Yep.
We did that sort of thing. We did, medleys from West Side Story.
Okay.
All sorts of different stuff. Some swing. We did some swing things like Buddy Rich type tunes and stuff like that. Yeah. Can't remember all the. And we also work with vocalists. We work with Kerry Bedell on one album, and she featured with the band quite a bit as well. So we did a whole album with her, featuring her. So we played all sorts of gigs and, toured and travelled around the country. And it's hard to sort of kind of remember all this because you're going back to the early 70s, so it's a long time ago. I've tried to remember as much as I can, but it's some of it gets a bit foggy if you get into fine detail. Some things I can remember as though it was yesterday, really, because I think some things are more precious to you than others, or whatever, or more things that you were more into, like doing your own thing and studying with Joe and stuff like that. But when it's somebody else's project and you're somebody else's band and you're playing on it, you tend to, play a supportive role, and, you're just part of the band. That's what you are,
Yeah. Oh, certainly, there's a lot of notes between then and now, so understandable. Now, going on, we'll talk about one of your projects, and you had mentioned this previously, and this is when you co-formed the fusion group Ayres Rock. Now, this was a concept group, I believe, and you had some interesting players involved in it. Can you tell us about sort of what was the genesis behind this ensemble?
Well, we didn't plan to do anything. It was a band that had formed as a trio before I come down to Melbourne. I was living in England. I was working in England. That's another story altogether. But yeah, I'm tired thinking about. I need to sleep. I'm tired thinking about all the. No, I'm only kidding. No, I'm not tired at all. I'm quite. Yeah, but I'm sort of thinking, how did I do these things? You know, I mean, I can't imagine it now at this age to be trying to do. I'd be dead. But I was in England at the time, and I got a call from Jimmy Doyle, who I'd played with very early on. He was a key figure in, and I mentioned him before, and he was an amazing guitar player, and we were good friends, and played with him very early on, even before the Col Nolan group. We were in a group called the Soul Syndicate, not Soul Syndicate, the Soul Mates, and it was at the Coogee Bay Hotel. It was a good band too, and that was the very first thing I played in. That was the kind of the very early days.
Wow.
Where I was really getting the saxophone, trying to get the saxophone together, so I could sort of play things, but not much. A few riffs and a few things. I was, sort of not that proficient at that stage, and I wasn't doing any doubling or anything like that. So I got the call from Jimmy, and he said, we've got this band, and I knew the guys in it. It was Mark Kennedy on drums. He's a Melbourne drummer and one of the most phenomenal drummers I've ever played with. And Duncan Maguire on bass. And those guys were a rhythm section for all sorts of people, like Doug Parkinson and, all sorts of people that they played with. And they were like dynamite together. They just played, they locked in and they just played like a machine, they just, bang, when they hit it, it was on. So that attracted me. I thought, wow, I know it's going to feel good, straight away. So I'll go down. So I went down and to see what it was like. I thought I'll give it a try. I was on my way back to Australia. I moved over there with the family, and we'd lived there for a year. So I worked over in London for a year. And I thought, I don't know, I could go back to Sydney, I could go back to what I'm doing. But I thought, maybe this is going to be good. I'll give it a try. So I went down and, we did our first bit of a run through, and it felt great. And so that's how the band sort of, and then they decided to name it Ayres Rock. I don't know if they had a name for it by then, but Jimmy came up with the name. Jimmy Doyle came up with the name of Ayres Rock. It was something that was, Australian and something. So the whole idea of the band was to try and blend something of Australia to rock and fusion and jazz, to try and bring it together. So a lot of the numbers, a lot of the tunes on that, I don't know if you're any familiar with any of the music, but it was a lot of the compositions had an indigenous type feel to them, and that was intentional. The title track of the first album was one I wrote called Big Red Rock, and Jimmy Doyle was incredible at making a didgeridoo sound on the guitar through the wah-wah pedal and effects. Oh, wow. And it's quite eerie. It sounds, it's really like a didgeridoo. And so we used that, and we coupled it with other things, and with Western harmony, with more sophisticated Western harmony and some sort of thing. So, and we did the same thing on the second album. We did 2 albums, and the second album we did a thing called Beyond, which was one of my compositions, and it was the same thing. We used kind of an Aboriginal type feel to it, and it has that sort of thing to it. And the art cover for both albums had sort of Aboriginal artwork on covers. So that was it. So we did that. That was kind of the flavour, I guess, to fit with the title of the band. So that was it. So it was a combination of, it was a rock band, basically a rock band. Most of the other guys, I was really the only guy in it that you would call a jazz player or whatever, because I played with jazz people and I'd played jazz. The other guys had played more in funk and soul and rock sort of situations. So it was a bit of a blend of, but all those guys were capable of doing anything. And Jimmy was too. It just wasn't what they did most of the time. But Mark Kennedy one of the greatest drummers, and any drummer in Australia knows him and knows how great he was. All the jazz drummers loved him. And he could have played he had a great feel. But he never sort of went into the bebop thing or crossed over into the jazz area where he played. But he could have done anything. He was a bit like Weckl, a bit like Dave Weckl, but not. Dave Weckl could have done it, did everything. He crossed over with everyone, of course. Mark was capable of doing that. Wow. And did splatterings of it, but he could have done anything. He was absolutely amazing drummer. So that was the hub of the band. I think he was very important in the band. And I think without him, I don't think it would have been Ayres Rock. I think his contribution, his feel, and his musicianship had a lot to do with why that band was as good as it was. Not to take it away from everyone else. Everyone else was pretty good. And I think the combination of the band, when we hit it, it just felt right. Yeah. When we finally got the right combination, we had a few changes, and then we had added another guitar player called Chris Brown. And once we kind of locked in, we just knew we had something special between us. It just kind of worked. And there was a big following for the band, and we toured the US twice. We were the first band of that time to play to big audiences, 40,000 in America. Wow. Big stadiums and stuff. We did the stadiums, and we did small clubs as well, but we did the big circuit with bands like Bachman Turner Overdrive and Status Quo and some of these sort of known rock bands. And we recorded the second album. We recorded one album here, and we recorded the second album in Los Angeles at the record plant. So we got a lot of attention, and it ran about 3-4 years, that band. Yeah. Like a lot of projects, come and go. That's the thing with things. And so then it was, move on to the next chapter. And, but it was a special, I think the thing about Ayres Rock is that I got to play a lot of my own compositions. And I think when you're doing that, it's quite special. Yeah. Especially in America, especially when you could record in America. And I got a chance to, write orchestral, arrangements for the albums. Had a big string section and big budget. Oh wow! We were signed to A&N Records, which was Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss's label. So we did, toured all over the States, did all sorts of venues, and it was marvelous.
Oh, it's a fantastic. Yeah. Now, speaking of one project, or not necessarily a project, but a collaboration, which
this interview will go forever. Are we allowed to go?
No.
Is anyone going to?
There is no time limit at all.
Oh my God! But who's going? And no one's going to stay and listen to it this long.
But it's really interesting stuff, for sure.
Oh my God!
No, this is the last one, I promise. But,
I'm sorry I've talked so much. But please stop me if I do. But you asked me a question, and I can only answer it in my own way. Unfortunately, I wish I could be shorter. I'm being as short as I can, actually, because there's a lot in there, and there's a lot I've left out, of course. But anyway.
Yeah, but it's amazing, and please don't stop. Just keep doing what you're doing. It's great to hear all the stories. So one last collaboration I want to talk about is one that's actually been ongoing. To quote you, you've said this has been going on since 1978, and this is your collaboration with the renowned Australian pianist and composer Judy Bailey.
Yeah.
Now, how did you two initially come to work together?
Well, I mean, I knew, I used to, frequent the jazz clubs, and, so I was well aware who Judy Bailey was, and Errol Bartle and all these people. And so, that was before I was playing. So, I knew who they were. But I don't think I ever thought I'd be playing with, these people. That was it. I didn't know then. I hadn't started on the saxophone then, actually. So, it was early days. So I didn't know, if I'd ever reached that level of, jazz, playing jazz and all that. I hadn't done it. So anyway, I guess it was when I joined the Conservatorium staff, and I suppose that's when I hooked up. Judy had been there just a little bit before me, I think. I don't know how long, maybe just a year. I joined in 1978, February 1978. I joined the jazz department. And it was there through the connection there, I guess, that Judy asked me to join her quartet. She had a player. Oh God, I should know his name. This is embarrassing because I should know his name. He's passed away, and I can't think of it. It's gone out of my head. I just can't think of his name, but he was the saxophonist with Judy. I apologise to anyone listening who knows him, and I can't think of it. I may think of it. I'm sort of having a mental block.
Sorry, it usually comes to you at the
but
end.
Anyway, look, he left for whatever reason, I don't know, and she offered me the position to join the quartet. The quartet was established. It was Ron Philpott on bass, and John Pache on drums.
Okay.
So it went from there. We toured, Asia a couple of times. We've done many things. I've been in every lineup of her quartet and quintets from 78 till today.
Wow.
And she's just had a hip operation, and so she's been out of action, and because of COVID and everything else, we haven't worked for a little while, but we were doing quite regular gigs and things, and she still is amazing. She's 85 now, and she's absolutely amazing. There's no stopping her. She's an incredible musician, and so it's been a real joy to play with her and to be inspired by her, and we've done a few recordings together, and she played on my last album, and I've played on some of her albums and some of her orchestral works, but she's just an amazing person with a great mind. Sharp as a tack. She still plays great, and her knowledge is just amazing. So she's still going,
No, I should catch up with her. I haven't seen her in ages, but she's a phenomenal musician and just really infectious as well, just in terms of her enthusiasm for music.
Oh, her enthusiasm. She's a wonderful teacher and great role model for people, and she's just a real dedicated person. She's terribly dedicated to her teaching and to her music, and just a real Australian icon in jazz, that's for sure. And she'll be long remembered in the history books. That's for sure.
Now, speaking of long history, we talked about, we've only just really scratched the surface in terms of some of your musical projects, but, you've worked with some phenomenal musicians, as we've discussed, but, you've also worked with Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Freddie Hubbard. You did some arranging for Freddie Hubbard, Natalie Cole, Shirley Bassey, Georgie Fame, Sandy Scott we talked about. Too many to mention by name, but do you have a particular concert highlight? And if so, why is it so memorable to you? Sorry.
It's hard to know. Look, everything I've done musically, I've enjoyed. Every I've always tried to do it as well as I could for me. First of all, it's always got to be important to you, so you try, you've got to be trying to do it for you, but you're also doing it for the people that are hiring you. So you're trying to do a good job at whatever you're doing. So whatever I've done, I've put 100% into, I felt like I've put 100% into it, to try and take it seriously, to try and take it, do it professionally, to try and, do the right thing by the people I work with. And so I suppose the things closest to you would be things, I suppose Ayres Rock is a highlight, because I was playing my own music.
Yeah.
We were touring America, and, it was just very exciting. So I suppose that's something I wouldn't forget. The tours I did with Georgie Fame, I worked with him from around about that same time, from 77, 78, right till his last tour here was 2003. And I did every tour that he did out here. I think he must have come out here 12 or 14 times or 15 times or more. Wow. And I did all of those, and they were fun gigs. I loved those. Working with Freddie Hubbard, well, that'd have to be a highlight for anyone. That was with a big band. That was with John Hoffman's big band. And I was playing lead alto. I played a lot of lead alto. I'm known more as a jazz tenor player, I suppose. That's probably what most people have seen me do in terms of playing jazz. But I did as much lead alto work and doubling as I've done anything else. So Freddie's band, John Hoffman's band, Freddie was a guest. Freddie Hubbard was a guest, and he come out to Australia, and John put the band, it was already together. John Hoffman, great trumpet player, great American trumpet player who lived here, and sensational musician and very dear friend. He rang me up and he said, look, we've got a gig and Freddie Hubbard's coming out. Wow, So I said, okay. He said, look, would you write a chart for Freddie for this special occasion, for this thing? Stolen Moments, which was an Oliver Nelson tune, which I loved. And so I wrote a big band chart for Freddie, and lucky for me, he liked it. It was great. It was good, and he played amazingly on it, and I was very happy with the way it turned out and everything. But the first rehearsal that we did, and Freddie had a bit of a reputation and being a bit of a tough guy, and could be a bit hard on people, and he's a hard man,
Okay.
And this serious dude, and so we're all a bit nervous about working with him in the first place. So we did the first rehearsal, and George Brodbeck, who's an arranger here, had written a chart for Freddie as well, and he'd transcribed it off the recording and blown it up for the Hoffman Big Band. But unknowing, little did he know that he thought it was in the right key, but it wasn't. It was running a semitone out or something, and he didn't know. So he'd written the chart. So anyway, so okay, we play the first chart, and that's okay. And then we get to this one, and it's okay. Freddie plays the first chart, and he was nice and all that. And so anyway, we're all sort of still a bit tense, but it's going along okay. And okay, so we put up this chart, so we started off, and Freddie comes in and it's in the wrong key, of course. And Freddie stops, hey man, whoa, what's going on here? And we're thinking, what's going to happen? It's like he's going to crucify us. But he was lovely. He was real nice, and he was nice to us. He was great to us. He didn't do any of that. He was wonderful. He was totally professional. He loved the band. And he transposed his part, because, you know, it was difficult for the whole band to transpose everything, right? So he said, oh, don't worry, you know, he's okay. And, you know, just wiggled his valves, and, you know, he, you know, like the true genius he is, he was able to do that, where, you know, we would have had to, you know, kind of take the chart away and get it rewritten or something, you know. An 18-piece big band, you know, it's like trying to transpose it on site with all these runs, and, you know, forget it. So he had the solo part, and he had the melody, and he didn't seem to have any trouble transposing it, and it wasn't that easy, but he didn't have any trouble. And so that was a memorable moment that I haven't forgotten. So that was very special. There's been others. I guess, you know, my very first beginnings with the Crescents, that was very, very special. My first thing I ever did, and I was a founding member of that, and, you know, that group, and that was very special. I really liked that little group. It was a good little group, and we got on well. It was exciting. I was very young, and it means something, you know. It's got a special place somewhere in the memory. I don't know, there's a lot of other things. There's a lot of things, but I suppose those three things, you know, Ayres Rock, Freddie, the Crescents, you know, the early start, you know, those memories of performing. So, but once I got that saxophone, getting back to the saxophone, because this is about saxophone, so we're talking about everything else, but once I got that saxophone in my hand, I loved it, and, you know, and I still love playing the saxophone. You know, it's just such a great instrument. There's still so much to be discovered. It's a baby. It's the baby. Of all the wind instruments.
Well, it's true. It's relatively young in comparison to...
It's relatively young, and it's so versatile, and the sounds that you can make on it, and the sounds that people do make on it, it's wonderful, you know? Stan Getz doesn't sound anything like Michael Brecker. No, and it's just not what they're playing. It's their sound, the sound they make. It's a different sound, and that sound Mule made, wow. Those Mule recordings, I love those recordings. I often go back to them. I often go back to listen to them. I like the saxophone, so it doesn't matter if it's classical or if it's jazz or whatever it is. If it's a great saxophone player, you soon know. It doesn't take 2 seconds to know that Marcel Mule when you hear that and go, wow. And when you hear Charlie Parker, you go, wow. And, you know, you don't have to know anything about music to know that that's good. Some put it on to anyone and they'll say, gee, you know, they can play, can't they? You know, they know.
Now, in terms of, like, you know, your wealth of experience, and, you know, you've been here, done this, done everything. What advice would you give to young musicians looking to break or sort of make their mark on the professional music scene? Like, you know, your experiences back in the day probably a bit different to what they are now, but in terms of things that you've learned over time and what you've experienced, like what are some sort of tips would you suggest to young musicians these days?
Trying to get into the business. Oh, I think, you know, first of all, you've got to get as good as you can on your instrument. You know, be as good as you can. Get a good teacher. You know, study. Find out who the best teacher is, or find out who a teacher is, or whatever you want to do. Seek it out. Get good advice. Listen to people. Ask questions. Ask lots of questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I did. I always asked questions, lots of questions, too many maybe, but, you know, better to have too many than not enough, and then you're sorry ask the question. So ask questions, you know, hang around musicians. If you want to, you know, find out, you want to be a musician, you'd have to do that. Be professional. If you're going to be a musician, be professional. Don't be late. Turn up. get on there on time, do the right thing by the people that hire you. As far as how to get into the scene, I don't know. You're the best one. You're young. You know what what it's like. It was different for me. The work, I didn't have to go and social network, or I didn't have to call people and ask for work or whatever. I didn't have to do anything. The work came. I was very fortunate to be born at a time when and grew up in a time when there was a lot of music and there was a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of work. So I've come from a different. So when anyone asks me, I tell them, look, go and ask someone younger, because they'll know what's going on at the moment. And I don't even have Facebook. I don't even do Facebook, and I don't do any social media. And I only hear it from friends. They send me things, and that's why I don't even do that. I'm quite old-fashioned there when it comes. I've come from a different. I turned 78 this year, so
oh, wow.
I'm not a baby. So I've been around a long time. So I've come from a different period where you didn't ask for work, and you'd never do that. You'd never ask anyone for work. So or whatever, or try and hustle a gig or whatever. It wasn't something you'd ever do. So come from the old-fashioned way of doing it. I still, if I do any arrangements, not that I really do anything like that much now, but if I do, I still write by hand. So does Judy.
Yeah, I know.
It's with a pencil and rubber. But, and I'm not that computer savvy. I'm getting better. I'm trying to learn. But, boy, when you come from... I should have started. I mean, I think somebody like Oliver Nelson, if he had lived longer, he would have been into everything. He was a guy that was very modern at his time, and very much into technology and the latest things. He had all the Moog synthesizers set up in his, all these things. And he would have gone right into things. So I haven't, I don't know how to use Sibelius and all that sort of stuff. My students do it, and, I don't do it.
He's just, I got my pencil, I'm fine.
Yeah, well, the pencil's a bit slower now than it was. I could write a lot faster than I can now. It's, I don't know how I did it. I don't know how I did all those things. I think when you've talked about these things, when we've talked about them, I've babbled on about them but it's hard to comprehend how I did what I was doing. I think, how did I do that? You're writing all night and then not sleeping and and then just doing it, and I did it. I was just on running on adrenaline, and I loved it so much, and I still do. I still get such a kick out of music. I love music. I when I'm listening to watching a movie or something, I'm just in. I often don't even know what the movie's about. I really don't. I get so into listening to the music, especially I like a lot of old scores. Old stuff. There's a lot of old black and white, and so
with the big orchestrated.
Yeah, the big orchestration, the Max Steiners, and the David Raxons, and Lionel Newman, all these guys. The score. There's a famous story, can I tell that?
Well, please do.
Okay. This is a great John Williams story. John Williams, of course, the composer. We all know who he is, the most famous composer of our time. Well, when he was asked by Steven Spielberg to write the score to Schindler's List. I don't know if you know about that movie, but it's all about the Holocaust, and it's a very heavy film. Anyway, John Williams was asked. He didn't know anything about it. Just Steve Spielberg said it's about the Jews and the Holocaust, and so I'm going to send you the rushes or whatever. What do they call them? The rough cuts.
Okay.
And there's no music, of course, because he's going to do the music, so they're silent, and they're just a guide on what he's got to do. So he gets them, and he sits down, and he said he was so emotionally, this is in John Williams' words, he's so emotionally touched by these horrible scenes. I've seen the movie, it's incredible. I'd suggest everyone see it. It'll remind us what a horrible thing, you know, people went through in those times, you know, Jewish people. And anyway, so he's so moved by this, and he's also feeling insecure about it as a composer. He's thinking, how can I compose so? He rings Spielberg up and he says, hello, Stephen. He says, it's John. Look, he says, Stephen, he said, I've had a look at it. He said, it's unbelievable. He said, this is a real masterpiece. And he said, to be truthful, you know, look, honestly, to just so I bare my soul, you need a much better composer for this film score than me. And Spielberg said, yes, John, I know, but they're all dead. So he was talking about Max Steiner, and he was talking about David Raxton. You know, Max Steiner wrote the music for Gone with the Wind and thousands of other things. And so, John Williams did write the score, of course.
Yeah, of course.
And it was magnificent.
Yeah.
But he was so overwhelmed by it. But I thought it was a great story because I heard John Williams tell that, and I love that. I love that story. But, you know, but it's so many things. I mean, music's so great. It's so broad. Yeah. It's so wonderful, and it's just so much. It's so, you can't cover it in 100 lifetimes. You're just trying to get a taste of it now and do the best you can with what talent you've got or what you've got. And there's so many great musicians to inspire you out there, and so many things to. So I suppose to tell students to open themselves up to things, you know, don't think you're a jazz musician. You're a musician. To be a good jazz musician, you need to, you know, have heard Marcel Mule, I think. Then you'll know what's possible, and you know, listen to everything. Try and get. That's what I've done. I've had a real taste of everything musically in a way, and I think it's helped me a lot to understand a little bit about different genres of music. I don't think I'm an expert on any of them yet, but I've certainly tried to listen to them and try to appreciate them, you know, regardless of what the genre is. There's only two types of music, good and bad, you know, and it's mainly the musicians playing it. I think you'd agree. You know, you can get a bad arrangement with good players, and the bad arrangement actually sounds okay. And, you know, if it's played by bad players, it's just a bad arrangement again. So, you know, I think if, you know, listen to everything you can, try and keep an open mind. It's a lot harder these days, I think, to try and break in as a professional musician, and so few do it for a living. Most seem to supplement their income with teaching. Seems education's a big part of the way musicians operate these days all over the world.
Now, sort of coming back a little bit, we have talked about this, so I'm going to gloss over it because we've sort of, this is on the original questions I sent you, but we have talked about it in terms of your arranging. Now, we talked about how you got into arranging, and, you know, some of the projects like the Channel 9 and a couple other productions, the Freddie Hubbard thing, of course. In terms of advice that you would give to musicians looking to get into arranging, what would you recommend to musicians wanting to get started in, you know, developing their skills as an arranger?
I think there's a lot more tools available now. I mean, there's probably a lot of things online where you can, you know, get lessons online, and there's all that sort of stuff. I mean, the way I did it, I can only go, I don't know. I think the art of doing it is still much the same. It still comes down to the imagination of the person and their knowledge of orchestration, because it's how you write for these instruments and how you know what these instruments can do. and what it's best for them and their role. If you're going to try and write trumpet parts for the trombone, forget it. It's not going to work. The instrument won't do it. You know, you have to understand, I think, orchestration is a very important thing, and to really study the instruments. I mean, from what I gather, Sibelius will do certain things for you. If it's out of range, it puts it in the right one, and you know all this stuff. But just knowing, you know, try not to, you know, have the voicings or, you know, the saxophones on, you know, honking out on low B flat or something, you know, as a third or something. You know, you've really got to know what. You know, what you can do with the instruments. So I think that's important. I think also you have to listen to what you want something to be. You know, I think if you study arrangements, different people's arrangements and different arrangements, you get an idea of perhaps what you want to do. So you get ideas from there.
Okay.
But as far as studying, there's certain books, and there's probably different ones. My first arranging book that I got that really helped me enormously was Henry Mancini's Sounds and Scores. It's one of the greatest books. It's still available, I think. And his orchestration was fantastic for writing for, you know, trombones, closed position, open position, saxes, open position, blah, 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 strings with woodwinds, you know, different combination of woodwinds. And they were all recorded examples. Writing for French horns, writing for harp, you know, writing for percussion, you know, writing for drums, you know, all that, everything. So you could actually look at the scores and you could see the parts and all that. And so I did that. That's basically how I got an idea of what to do. When I saw Oliver Nelson conducting, there were different voicings. You know, his voicings were much more clustery, and there were a lot of things that I, you know, had heard but was a bit scared to try, you know, and stuff like that. So when I thought, wow, look what he's done here. I think I'll try that on the next time I do something, you know. So that's how I got ideas. I think, you know, you learn from everyone, and I think, you know, I think you learn from everyone. I try and tell students to not look to one teacher for everything. There isn't one teacher for everything. There's a teacher, and then there's other teachers, and then there's the most important teacher is you. You're your best teacher. You know, you end up figuring it out. You know, that's the thing. Once the student takes control or takes responsibility, then they progress. That's the big message, I think, that it took me a long time to find out that, I think. And once I did, I started to realize that there isn't a magic wand. There's just hard work. You know, Charlie Parker did 12 to 14 hours a day for 4 years. You know, he didn't get good, you know, just sitting around thinking about it. And so there's a lot of responsibility on the student in a way. I think the job of the teacher is to guide, direct, and hopefully inspire and challenge the student, you know, to try and get better. But in the long run, it's the students that's going to do it, aren't they? You know, they're going to be the ones that are going to actually go, you know, that's it, you know, and also they're going to move away from you, and they're going to talk to their friends, and they're going to have other teachers or whatever, and they're going to hear different opinions of things, and, you know, it's going to be said in a different way. It could be the same thing said in a different way that sets you off and just goes, wow, I didn't think of that, and that sets you on your path. So I guess keep your mind open that no one has it all. Not even Joe Allard. You know, Joe Allard didn't teach any. Stan gets how to play jazz. You know. You know, and as far as I know, he didn't teach anyone anything about improvisation, but he freed them. His method freed them in a way, so that, you know, it allowed them to think less about the instrument and more about the music, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, would have given them the tools to pursue what they did and develop their own sounds.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you're playing with a lot of tension and, you know, there's things wrong, it's very hard to concentrate on music if what you're playing doesn't sound right, you know.
Yes.
If it doesn't feel right and it doesn't sound right and it doesn't feel natural and you're thinking about that all the time, well, you're not going to kind of think about what you're going to do. If you're playing jazz, you have to forget that. You can't do that. You've got to be concentrating on making a line, you know, following a line, melodic line. It's very instant. It's moving so fast. You can't start to think about your read and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, need to have that in place before you start.
Yeah.
So I think they were the things perhaps that helped those people and that Joe studied with, you know. He helped them find freedom on their instrument.
Yeah. Going on, still picking your brains in terms of performance and practice and all that. We have talked about your doubling, like, you know, you do the clarinets and the flutes, and, you know, I've heard your flute playing. It's I know you don't think it, you know, you're equally good at it, but it is for some
it's
amazing
okay.
playing.
Yeah, look, I got by. You know, there were much better doublers than me, and especially the guys in LA and New York. They're ridiculous. But I managed to fool them somehow. You know? No, I mean I managed to be able to play what was required, and you know, I did all sorts of lead alto work, as you know, with, you know, all those people you mentioned that used to come out here, and, you know, different people. And, you know, most of the stuff were written for doublers, so they don't write, you know, you're not ever going to have to play, you know, the Mozart clarinet concerto or, you know, Flight of the Bumblebee on the flute. You know, you won't have to do that.
Yeah,
you know, it's trying to get a good sound out of them, a good clear sound, trying to play, you know, get them in tune, be able to play in tune, be able to play in time, and, you know, be able to just get over your instrument pretty well, was good enough to get me through. I claim to be no virtuoso on the clarinet or the flute. I'm better on the saxophone. I think it's my primary instrument, but still things I'd like to be able to do, and still things I'm trying to do, and still trying to get better. I don't know if it's too late, but I don't think it is. I mean, you know, Sonny Rollins, I saw an interview with him and he was talking about he wants to get better, and I thought, geez, yeah. And I mean, how much better could he get than the recordings that he made, you know? I mean, but to him, perhaps he's hearing something better now than he did. You know, I don't know. I don't know what he was talking about, but God love him. He was enthusiastic, and he still is. He's still here, isn't he? Yeah, Sonny's still with us, yeah. He hasn't gone, and he's stopped playing, though. He stopped playing altogether now because I think he's physically unable to play. And I think that's the problem with wind instruments as you get older. You know, this is something that everyone will relate to if they're around my age, is endurance. Endurance is difficult. It goes really quick. You know, I had endurance like a horse when I was young, you know, but I was playing a lot then. So trying to maintain anything now is quite difficult. And so my doubling, now the clarinet, no, I don't get it. I get the clarinet out when I have to teach it. Okay. If somebody says, look, can you give me a clarinet lesson? I'll make sure I practice the clarinet a bit before I get to them. Unless it's very simple and they're asking something, and then I could just pick it up and do it. Otherwise, you know, I try and stay ahead of that a little bit, but I don't do. I still play the flute because I have to. It's an instrument that I don't think you can put down, and the clarinet either. But the clarinet and the saxophone are similar, so you've got some similarity, and they've both got reeds. That's another thing with Joe, is the clarinet and you know, there's often a school of thought that the clarinet, you should have one embouchure for the clarinet, you should have one for the saxophone and all that. Well, Joe it's a reed. If it's a reed, that's what you're playing. You're playing the reed. The acoustics of the instrument make it different, not the reed, not the mouthpiece and the reed. The mouthpiece is beating up, on the reed. So his approach to clarinet saxophone was the same. So that's pretty much the same. I mean, when I say the same, I don't think anything's the same. If you go to sopranino saxophone to baritone, it's not the same.
Oh yeah, there's differences.
The jaw pressure and everything is completely different. You've got to be very careful on the sopranino. You don't have to be that careful on the bass saxophone. You have to kind of be loose and off, and it's different. It's more jaw pressure and the size of the reed, and the reed's bigger and the other one's smaller and your mouth's smaller and all that stuff. It's making that adjustment, but you're still vibrating that reed.
Yeah.
And if you vibrate it the wrong way, it's not going to come out right. So this was Joe's thing. The behavior at the reed has to be right. So his focus was on the reed. Everything was about the reed. That was it.
In terms of just switching between all the different saxes and all the doubles and stuff, what would you suggest to say like students maybe at a tertiary level looking to sort of work on that sort of versatility between all the different instruments in terms of things they should be practicing to help them maintain a consistent level across all those instruments?
To maintain it, I think you really, unless you're just going to lock yourself in your room for 14 hours a day like Bird did with your saxophone and the clarinet on the one peg and the flute on the other and your piccolo in your pocket, and you're just going to be practicing all day. I don't know any other way than do it than to be in a show or be in a position where you can do it. I think it's very difficult to do it in your room. I think that's the early preparation of it, but to maintain it, I think you have to be doing it like the guys here, like Mark Taylor, and the guys that do the theatre,
all the shows and stuff.
All the shows, yeah. They go from one show to the other, and I think I did similar things, but I did some subs on Cats and Phantom of the Opera and a couple other things, bits and pieces. So I went in there and just did a few shows. I didn't ever do them for long times, But in between, I was doing other things. I was playing like with Tommy Tico and doing all that doubling stuff, and then Sinatra had come out or somebody had come out, and you have to play the book. So, and I was doing all those different things. I was doubling all the time. I was studios all the time and all that. When that sort of dried up, which it did to a degree in the late 90s, and then the 2000s started to really decline. So the big period for studios is sort of gone, and that sort of work started to disappear. Clubs started to not have bands, and there was no doubling, and so that was when I sort of started to concentrate on live playing more, saxophone, teaching, that sort of thing, and get out of it, because you can't maintain it unless, if you want to do that, you're just going to be a slave to the instrument. So, right. You're just going to have to practice all day, to try. And then somebody calls you for a gig, and it's in the pit, and or whatever. You can't. There's nowhere to hide.
No.
There's nowhere to hide. It's not a jazz gig where you can make it up and you can play something that's not there. You have to play what's there, and you have to play it at the dynamic level it's there. And the note, whatever note's written. If it's high F sharp on the flute, which is one of the worst notes on the flute, and triple pianissimo, and you've got to come in on it, well, you're not going to do it unless you're playing a live flute. So those sort of things are difficult. So I think find good teachers. I think that's the thing for the instruments, and see if you can find teachers, preferably doublers, because doublers understand your problems, so they can, guys like Mark and guys like that would be very good, because they've worked it out, and they're young, and they would be, they, you know, they're doing it, and you know they kind of could steer you in the right direction.
Yeah.
I think, you know, somebody that's a doubler, it's probably better, you know. I think if you want to get serious about the instrument, you should study it classically if you want to really get chops on it.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to play repertoire, you know. I mean, with Joe, it was always just a couple of notes. You never got to play anything. You know, you never got played a couple of notes and that was it. But, you know, if you go to a classical teacher, it's probably, they're going to give you hard stuff to play.
Yeah.
It's going to be, you know, flying over you. So you're going to really develop if you study from someone, and try and study with someone that perhaps has taught doublers. You know, there's a few people around, few James Cordham. Yep. A terrific, magnificent flute player, and he's, you know, he's had some doubling students. I mean, I start all my students off, if they want some lessons, I get them up to a certain point, you know, with it. I give them really good basics that they can work from. I start them the right way, because I know I started the wrong way, and, you know, I know what the right way to start is. Yeah. So I give them the right start, you know, start this way. Don't make the sound this way. Be patient. Do this. Stay on this for a while, you know. Don't just start blowing the thing, and you'll get into a lot of bad habits. You do it all the wrong way, and then somebody will have to fix it up, you know, get it right in the beginning. So I think try and get with a good teacher who's, you know, not too much one way and doesn't understand what it is to play a clarinet and then pick up a flute, and they have no idea that, you know, it's difficult to do that, and they don't want to know, and they don't understand it. Somebody that's closed-minded or somebody, don't steer away from them, you know. Get somebody that does know, you know, Miles Davis, has heard of Miles Davis, and, you know, they just don't know the classical world. You know, they've heard of Elvis Presley and, you know, whatever. You know, they're not that close-minded. They think, oh, jazz is, you know, silly. So don't study with someone like that. Otherwise you'll be, if there are those sort of people around, there used to be. Maybe not now. I don't think you could exist now without being versatile. You know?
For sure.
I think things have changed. Times have changed there.
Yeah. Now going on, like we talk about, you know, you started teaching at the Sydney Conservatorium around '78, and you know, you've been there ever since, and, you know, teaching you know, saxophone players, and, you know, helping them develop their sounds and things, and improvisation and all this and everything. I'd like to ask you about, from the time you started to now, how have you seen the course evolve and develop, or even change during your time there?
It's changed a lot. I mean, there was no degree at all, and then I think there was a diploma of jazz, which was 2 years. Well, now of course we have Bachelor of Music, we have Masters. You can do PhD. You can. We've got 4 big bands. We've got a very big staff. I was the only saxophone teacher there at that stage. Then Don was there, but Don didn't teach a lot. He was head of the course, and so most of the students come to me. And so, you know, Don taught a little bit, but he was doing other stuff, impro and blah blah blah, and, you know, running ensembles, and, you know. So it's big now. We've got, you know, all sorts of, you know, a lot of teachers. We're in another building. It was in the old building, you know. And then so it's a different thing altogether now. It's a much bigger organisation. It's become part of the, you know, the Sydney Uni. It was sort of a little thing on its own before. Oh, it's very different. It was more like a little unit before, very, very few teachers. So I think it's changed a lot. It changed, and it's a world-class facility now in terms of people studying. You know, there's incredible classical department, incredible jazz department. We've got some excellent teachers there, and, you know, it's very high standard. I think we produce pretty good students in general. You know, and there's most of the, we certainly produced a lot from the past, that's for sure. There's in terms of the saxophone anyway. There's some really tremendous players that have gone on to do all sorts of things. So, you know, we've had some great talent. I think if there were more opportunities for them, more of them would do it. But it's a hard go now to sort of kind of go and be a jazz star. You know, that's very difficult, very difficult.
Yeah, well, as you say, like, you know, players these days have to be quite versatile to be performing and gigging. And that's,
I think it's all about, you know, studying jazz is okay. It's probably something you're going to want to do, but it's something that it mightn't be everything you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I think be as good, well-rounded as you can, and try and, you know, be as versatile as you can, you know, as a musician. Be able to play at different styles and, you know, with different things. And, you know, I'm sure you have to do it. And, you know, you play in the Nexus quartet, and I'm sure you do other things. And, you know, you just can't put your eggs in one basket because the basket's a bit empty. It hasn't got enough eggs in it.
Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, to kind of, you know, pay the rent, feed the family, whatever you're doing, you know, it's okay if you're living with mum and dad. But as soon as you leave mum and dad, you know, there's got to be money in the wallet.
In the big bad world,
the real world comes in. So, you know, you know, it's a joy to play some jazz, and most people, I think, do that, want to do that, and guys that do that, they'll continue to do that. But the bread and butter will probably be the non-jazz gigs. The gigs that pay the big money.
Now, talking about the students, and I mentioned before that you're known as the fixer when it comes to helping young saxophone players when they come to the con and might have some issues. Now, talking about the problems that tend to be needing adjustment, I think you sort of touched on this. It tends to be a lot about tension. It seems to be the biggest issue that a lot of students have when they first come, and then you have to go and correct it. Can you talk us through what it is that you do, basically, in terms of helping them out now?
Well, it's a number of things. It's, you know, based on Joe Allard and Vic Morosco's, you know, or rather Joe Allard's principles that Vic Morosco learnt from Joe. So it all comes back to Joe Allard as being the primary thing. Although I have, you know, I've come to a lot of realizations myself, of course, which you do because, you know, I was a vocalist first, so I use that. I encourage my students to sing if they can't do something, and, you know, musically or orally on the instrument. It frees you up if you do. You know, it sort of just seems to do wonderful things. If you sing into the flute, if you just sing into it and then you blow into it, some of the thing sounds good. You know, it's sort of like there's simple little things I've found. So in terms of being a fixer, of course, part of my job there at the con is to take, you know, students, you know, first year and second year students. I do have master students and other students as well, but generally I take the first and second year ones because they're the ones that are developing. So I try and get them on their way, and they're mostly the ones that haven't sorted things out yet. You know, they haven't tried and figured it out. So, excuse me, I'll just have some water.
That's right.
So anyway, as far as sound or whatever, you know, so many people where you work, you know, I've got a reputation of helping people with their sound. Well, first of all, there's a lot of components to sound. If you think about it. The first thing is the concept that's in your mind. You know, the first thing, that's the most important thing. Most people, that's missing in some places. They haven't got that yet. They haven't figured that, the easy one first. They kind of haven't sorted that out, because that's what I got from Joe in a lot of ways, that everything is pre-heard, that, you know, it doesn't matter what you do, everything else reacts to that. So when he said that, that was a bit of a turning point for me. So anyway, so there's the concept of sound. Then, of course, there's the mouthpiece and reed. you've got to look at this first, because this is a mistake of a lot of teachers. A lot of times they don't look at that, or they're trying to sort out things, and the guy's got the reed's no good. Most reeds are terrible, as we know. You go through a box of reeds and you've got to fiddle with them, and then you get a good one, and everyone knows when you get a real good one, and you pull it out and it just does everything, and it's marvelous. Otherwise you've got to break them in and play them in, and you've got to maybe work with the knife and all that. But a lot of times it's something that they don't think about. They may have been playing on a C-star mouthpiece, for example. Okay, so on a C-star mouthpiece, maybe you play a 3 blue box or something. Okay, or 3 or 3.5. Some people can. Maybe a 3 sounds okay. All right, they'll go and buy. They've done studying. They've been studying somewhere with somebody, and they've got them, on say a C-star equivalent. Probably other mouthpieces now, but that sort of thing. So it's pretty close. It's pretty narrow. And okay, so they'll do that. Then they get they're wanting to get more sound or a different sound. So they go to the shop and they buy a mouthpiece, and they put their 3 blue box on it, and the tip opening's big, and there's a problem. It won't work. The blue box is hard. It's like a 3 is like a 3.5 in another type of reed, it's half a strength harder or something, sometimes more. A very hard reed to break in, and not that suitable for jazz. I haven't found anyway the blue boxes. I use the other Van Doorns, the double Zs and the jazz cut. The Jarvis. Jarvis, yeah. They're better. And so they've got the wrong reed on and the thing, and and they're trying to get something out of the thing. So a lot of times it can be as simple as that. The reed's too hard, and you tell them, okay, look, put this 2.5 on. Here's a Rico 2.5, or it's whatever, or a double Z 2.5, and all of a sudden the air's all gone. That airy sound's gone, and all of a sudden they're getting their low notes are a little better. Or number one is concept. Concept of sound. If you've got that helps a lot, because that tells you that this sounds terrible. Maybe I should try another reed, put it on. I'm gonna. So that kind of tells me I missed that first step. Then the next one is the instrument playing. This is the other trap, because I remember a time when I had a student once, a young student, and I'll try and keep this brief. He come to me and he said, I said, he was very young. I think it was only about 9 or 10 or something, a little fella. And he said, can you help me with my my low notes? And I said, what's wrong? And he said, I can't play them. I said, how long have you been playing? He said, I've been playing now for 2 years. And I said, and I've never been able to play the low note. And I said, give me the instrument. So I put my mouthpiece on, and nobody, could have, John Coltrane couldn't have played, you got the note out, it wouldn't matter who it was, right? It was leaking. So I turned the G sharp screw. I could see it. I had a look, and I thought the G sharp's going up, and it's like, so he could get C, he could get low C, because you can't get B flat, B natural, or C sharp, because that's operated by the G sharp. As soon as you press that key, if that key opens, it opens those ones. So you could get D and C, not the other one. So I just got the sag, and I figured out what it was, and I turned the screw and handed it back to him, and B flat come out, this big grin. This big grin. So I said to him, you've been playing for 2 years. I said, why didn't you try your saxophone? I said, has it always been like this? He said, right from the start, I said, well, why didn't you teach us play it? He said, well, my teacher's a trumpet player, doesn't play the saxophone. Wow. And she said, so she just kept telling me to loosen off and drop the jaw right away, and all this stuff. So the poor kid. So anyway, so that was it. So check the instrument. Make sure. Don't blame the student before. If it's leaking and it's it's horrible, and it's like it won't work. You better try and play it and see if you can play it first.
Yeah.
Then the third one, of course, comes down, if that's all okay, and if you think the guy's got some ears and, you know, he can hear something, then he knows, look, you know, I'm not getting the sound I want, you know, I don't know what it is, but, you know, when I play, my jaw gets all tight, or you know, my throat gets sore, or I just can't get the low notes. When I play low notes, I can't get them to come out. When I go up high, and this is a familiar story for alto players, is he sharp? The name of, you know, that's the name of the alto player. Is he sharp? You know, like, you know, when you first play alto or you first play, you know, it's like, how do you play the open C sharp in tune? You know, you can't. It's out and you're always sharp and you know, go. So sometimes it's things like that, and then you've got to look into why. And often it's, you know, if the guy can hear it's out of sharp, if it's sharp, and he says, I know, I say, well, can you tell if you're flat or sharp? I'm sharp. Well, then it's something to do with tension. Mm-hmm. It's something to do with something. If the reed is okay and the mouthpiece is, you know, not ridiculous, then it's something to do with it. So I think you've got to take a look and see what they're doing. And there's a number of things that you can do to troubleshoot that. You know, and so that's what I look for. Sometimes it's, you know, sometimes it's something very subtle. They're taking too much mouthpiece, or they're not taking enough mouthpiece, or, you know, there's too much pressure on the top of the mouthpiece, or, you know, they're just tight in general. So one of the exercises I got from Joe, and Vic Moscow never taught this. I never knew about it till I went to Joe, and Joe was a mouthpiece exercise. Mm-hmm. And that was the first one that Joe ever gave me. And he said, you know, what can you play on the mouthpiece? And I never thought about playing on the mouthpiece, you know, I just never thought about it. And there's schools of thoughts that you play concert A and that's what you do for the whole range and all that. And Joe didn't believe in that, and either do I. I just don't, it doesn't seem like that. If I pull the mouthpiece off and I'm trying to play subtone, I'm nowhere near that pitch. So there is adjustments. It might be a stable point, and people will say, well, it gives you the most focused sound or whatever. But Joe wasn't from that school, if you want of thought. So, but I think you have to have a certain amount of pressure at the reed, otherwise if you don't, it's going to be out of focus, it's going to be wrong. So you can't play too loose. Yeah. You certainly don't want to be too tight, too much pressure. So I guess the Mouthpiece Exercise, the Overtone series, Joe had a lot of different methods for developing awareness of what you're doing, like playing with your top lip completely off the mouthpiece was one of his things, to get the lip to behave here, to get the bottom lip to sort of not bunch up and crush the sound. Yeah. So that was one. The other ones, he gave all sorts of exercises, you know, crazy exercises that I did with him, or he did, and then I later learned to do them, where Joe would play an ascending scale, like da 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 da. He'd play a scale, right? You know, but not play it, just finger the scale. Then he would go. So the scale would go up, Joe would go down. Of course, it was altissimo. Ah, okay. It was altissimo, but he'd defy the, you know, the logic of it, where you da 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 da. So you're fingering up the scale, you know, up the keyboard, but I could do it too. And then you do the reverse. So he had those sort of exercises that he demonstrated. And what it was to demonstrate was the power of your ear, the power of the ear and the mind, and the action of perhaps what you're doing here, very little here, but more what you're doing in here. So his thing was big on the use of the larynx in playing, and the correct position of the tongue. And I think we talked about that, the tongue being the enemy of tone. The tongue being attached to the throat can close the throat, because you can't pull your tongue out. It's attached to the back. So you tense your tongue, you tense your throat. So, you know, all those things. So it's very difficult to give any specific thing because you take it on a case by case basis. If somebody comes in and they have a good sound, but they're having a bit of trouble with intonation, I use different methods to try and get them to there, because I don't want to change their embouchure because it doesn't need to be changed. It's just very subtle. It might be jaw pressure, and it might be to do with their tongue and other things. Other people will come in and they've got too much tucked over here, or lips out here, or something. It's extreme. And then if they're not getting good results, then they're not happy with what they're doing. Well, then I change it. So it's a bit of a case of if it ain't broke, don't fix it sometimes. And then go on and then see what's happening. And then the guy runs into a bit of trouble and he can't play something, and he says, he sounds okay, but can't do something. And then you say, well, look, maybe if you do these exercises, the overtone series, let's do the overtone series. They start to do the overtone series and they can't do it. You know, they split, the overtones split. They get the first overtone, then they get the second one, then they go for the B flat. And the B flat, it splits. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason why. It's got to be, if you do the wrong thing at the reed, you won't have a chance. Nothing will work, you know, and you know, nothing you do will work. It'll be like putting a 5 reed on, you know. It won't happen. You know, so there's a lot of things that I do in that way. So it's complex. I think it's a complex subject. And that's why so many people like Dave Liebman studied with Joe for many years, even though Joe told the same things over and over and over. Same stories and the same exercises and the same principles. It was until you got it. You know? And it takes a long time to get it. You know, that's what I found, but it's worth it. I've found, especially playing in a contemporary type way where I've had to play in all different sort of situations, it's been very good. It's been the answer to a lot of my prayers, you know. Especially the sharp alto, you know. that was always hard to begin when people play, and you know, they press the octave key and up it goes, and you know, they play the palm keys and they're sharp. And being able to have exercises and things, you know, bending exercises and different things where you can sing your pitch, where you can use your vocal part, you can use your singing mechanism if you want. And I think, you know, it come fairly natural once I sort of figured out, because I'd been sort of doing that in a way as a singer, you know.
Like instinctively,
Yeah, instinctively without knowing it. So, but I sort of kind of thought that was too easy probably, and made it hard for myself. You know, so. Who knows? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it all out, you know.
It's a lifelong journey.
It's a lifelong, yes, I think so. I think, but I think really, you know, I think the product of a good sound is not having a lot of tension in whatever you do. If everything is tense and everything's tight and this is all tight and this is tight and your jaw's tight and you know your tongue's tight and everything's going to sound rotten anyway. It's not going to sound right. You have to make it as natural as you can, and I think I got that from Joe Allard, that play as naturally as you can and train your ear to do the rest for you. And so you end up finding an embouchure that kind of works, I think. I think that's it. And Joe, I think that's what I took from Joe. There isn't one embouchure. It turns to what you're doing. And I think you will change things a little bit depending on what you're doing, because you have to. Not one thing's not going to give you, you know, exactly the same thing.
It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
I believe you do have to be very flexible, and I think you probably agree. It's no matter what you do, you have to do that. I'm sure the contemporary classical guys, they have to do it. You know, they have to make those adjustments. They can't do everything the one way. you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
of course.
It's the same thing.
Now, it's a bit of a deep question, but I think you've already answered this, maybe indirectly. But just wanted to ask you about your teaching philosophy, like sort of the essence of it. And I think you were saying, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, your big thing is trying to make students just giving them the ability to be as open as possible and just willing to learn things and just be open, essentially.
I think I try and teach them to teach themselves.
Yep.
I think the responsibility is with them to take what's given to them and work it. If they don't work those things, if they don't go away and do it, it's not going to happen by magic. They have to, you know, so I think, you know, I try and look for the best in my students. I try and look for their better qualities, and I compliment those always in their playing. There's some students really knock me out with what they can do. I really like what they can do. Their mind, the way they think about it, their spirit, just the way they are as people, whatever. There's a lot, you know, you're almost like a psychologist and as a teacher, any teacher is.
Yeah.
You know, somebody walks in and, you know, they've got a, you know, some people, you know, you've got to try and figure them out or something. And so try and figure out what they want. Some people are shy and you may take that the wrong way, you know. You know, so you've got to be able to, I think you've got to be able to sort of help someone. I think the first question that I usually ask students is, what can I help you with?
Yeah.
If they come to me and they're seeking me out, or if they come to the con and they turn up for their first lesson, I usually talk to them a bit about what they've done and who they've studied with, and you know what sort of mouthpiece you got and what reed it is, and you know, find out a few things. And then I say, look, is there anything particularly you'd like to talk about, or is there anything that you'd like to be able to do a bit better? And then some of them say everything. You know, what would you like to do better? Everything. But some are very specific and they say, oh, gee, you know, nobody's ever asked me that. You know, look, I can't do this. I'd love to do subtone. I can't for the life of me do this. When I go down, it burbles and it does this, and so then I'll help them with that. That could go on for a few weeks, you know, till they kind of get the gist of it. And I say, look, it may take a little bit of time. Just work on it. I give them a routine that I've got to develop that, and to try and tell them, be patient. It's going to be one note at a time for a little while, you know, till the body gets used to it, and then you're going to add another note, and you know, eventually you'll get down to B flat and you'll be able to do it. Sometimes it takes people longer than others, and you know, so there's always, you know, people have different learning rate of learning. The way they can learn. Some people are quick as anything. You know, I've got students, and you know, you've got to keep ahead of them. These ones are, you know, you're giving something, they come back and they can do it the next week. Others, you know, it takes them 12 months to get it. So I think it's a case by case basis, but I try and just, you know, find where the students, see if I can find where they're at and see if I can help them take that further. And then, you know, just try and give them other things, to try and direct them into other things, you know, play them things, you know. A lot of times they've never heard Marcel Mill, for example. So, you know, I'll say, well, listen, you know, if you think that's hard, have a listen to this. You know? Listen to what this guy could do. So when you're trying to get that interval right, just listen to what this guy can do. And then, you know, tell them to listen to different things. But usually the guys that come, you know, the one advantage to teaching someone that may come out to the house here and, you know, is just a bit of an amateur and come out and probably never going to go to the con, or probably not good enough to get in, or whatever. It's a bit different to when people come into the degree course, because they're actually in there to learn. They're really keen. They really want to do this. So it's actually pretty easy. It's an easy job in a sense, because they're in there to do this. They've come out of school, straight out of school. who'd want to go back to another school? You know?
Yeah.
Are you mad? I hated school. It was terrible. I was awful. I was a terrible student. And I didn't like school very much. I was glad to finish it, I tell you that. And the last thing I would have wanted to do was go to school. But these guys want to come to music school because music's fun, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, school wasn't always fun. You know, some subjects were great, and thank God we went to school. And, you know, we learned. And, you know, I didn't hate school, but, you know, I was glad to leave. You know, it was one of those things. I was fed up by the end. I wanted to just go and do things. And, you know, these kids are going to come and tie themselves up for 4 years or maybe longer.
Yeah.
They're going to do masters and then PhD, and they're going to be there forever, like you.
Oh, yeah.
I think you spent a lot of time,
I got out there eventually.
You got out there eventually, but, you know, you were doing something you wanted to do. It was very passionate. It was very important to you.
Yeah.
And it was something that you were going to do rather than something where you study, you know, chemistry or some other, you know, something, you know, that is not particularly, you don't have to get expert at it to be able to cope with life, you know. Whatever you've learned, sometimes you know, do things at school and, you know, it's useful, but you forget it. But with music, you know, it's something you wanted to do, and that's why you did it. So
yeah,
that's why you're in the position you're in, and, you know, doing what you're doing. So I suppose that drove you to want to do it. So they come in, and, you know, they come into that's it. They come in and they're keen. They want to do it. So it's easy to teach people like that in a way. Occasionally, you might get somebody that you have to push along. Most times they, you know, they understand that if they don't get stuck into it, they're going to fail or whatever, or they'll look stupid in front of their mates and they won't be able to play this tune properly. You know, they'll, you know, so they're keen to try and learn. And so it's not all fixing embouchures. You know, sometimes I always introduce students to the mouthpiece exercise overtones. Everyone does that. I always get them, can you do overtones? And a lot of them say yes, and then they pick the horn up and say, no, that's not the way you do overtones. But, you know, you've got the general idea, but they're not supposed to all come out together. You know, they're supposed to come out separately and sound like beautiful notes. And what? Can they really do that? Yeah, they can. And so that sort of stuff is stuff I teach, you know, I guess, and what I think is important. The things I learned from Joe and Vic were pretty much what I do. Yeah.
Now, just powering through, the hot topic for the year, of course, is COVID-19. It's affected all of us in different ways, and we were talking just before we started how you know, you were doing a lot of your teaching online, the same method we're communicating now. But in terms of like playing and everything like that, obviously that's impacted all of us, and I'm assuming you as well, in terms of, you know, the gigs that potentially would have been happening that don't happen now. And what sort of things have you been doing during this time, and sort of times not gigging or anything like that?
You mean as far as teaching goes?
Well, teaching and playing.
Well, I haven't been doing a lot of playing because everything closed down. Everything shut down for a while, so no one could do anything. Then I was working regular gig with Judy Bailey, and then her hip went on her, and we couldn't get her up the stairs. So the gig we were doing, there were 2 flights of stairs with no lift. Jesus. So that gig fell through, and that was my regular gig. And so I've done a few little bits and pieces, but no, you know, mostly I taught on Zoom, of course. You know, I taught through the COVID thing and right through, and I found that challenging. It was hard, you know, it was different. It wasn't as, you know, I pretty much started with all the students on, you know, fixing the embouchures or whatever, you know, fixing the sounds and whatever. So that had been set into place a bit, so I didn't have to do that much of it. It was mainly repertoire, talking about, you know, approaches to improvisation and, you know, just things, Jazz Nation in general, their technical exams and their transcriptions and stuff like that. So it was getting them to play and saying try this, try that, giving them. So it was not too bad, yeah, so it was okay. But yeah, it sort of changed things a little, I guess, for everyone.
I'm sure, yeah. Another question, and again, it's a bit of a deep one. How do you see the effects of COVID-19 on the jazz scene, and what do you think is installed for the future, like in terms of how it's going to change, and what sort of things do you reckon you're going to see?
I don't know. I mean, it's got to have affected a lot of things, and I think we're not going to know. We're just about out of we're out of lockdown. That's gone a long time ago here in New South Wales, but they're sort of just out of that in Melbourne not long ago, and they've closed Queensland to most. That's still not open to everyone, and then South Australia's shut or something, and or whatever. So I don't think it's complete. I don't know what we're going to see. It has to have affected a lot of businesses, whether JobKeeper, because that's the one where they're paying people to keep people employed or whatever, whether that the government has given these clubs, I don't know. I'm not sure how it'll affect the jazz clubs, whether it's going to affect it at all, or whether it's going to gradually get back to normal. I don't know. Gigs seem to be happening again, not so much for me, but for my son. He's a bass player, and he started doing some gigs again. And for a long time, there was nothing. There was just nothing. He didn't do any gigs for months. It was just went on forever. And I'd say, you got a gig? And he's a bass player, and they always work, And lately, he's been doing a couple of gigs a week or whatever, and it's starting to, he seems to be working on weekends again and stuff. And I know you said you were doing things, and so I don't know. I'm probably the worst to ask about it because I'm, not doing that many gigs myself now. I'm teaching, and I have a whole bunch of hobbies and other things I'm doing, which I've never had time to do, which I'm doing later in life and stuff, and different things that I like to enjoy doing. I'm still trying to keep match fit, hopefully, so if when gigs do come up, I can do them. And as I said, I'm not putting myself in the position where I have to go and double and stuff anymore, because it's too hard. It's too hard if you're not doing it, and you need to be. I don't do it. I do saxophone gigs, and that's about it. And then I'll play the flute sometimes if I get a gig and it's where I have to play a couple of bosses or something. I'll do that. A couple of tunes on flute. I'll do that. I feel comfortable because I play it enough to feel like I can sort of do something on it. But the saxophone's the main one. I have to keep doing that, otherwise I won't be able to play it. And there you go. So I'm still trying to play the thing after all these years.
All right. Well, we're coming up to the end of the interview, and again, thanks so much for your time.
It's been a real pleasure. Well, I'm sorry. I hope I didn't talk too long. I mean, it has been long. Can you cut this? Maybe you can cut this thing into two halves. I mean, otherwise no one's going to worry on the stay. They're all going to be asleep by the time they get through.
Well, you can bookmark it and watch it later and whatever, but this isn't the longest interview, so that's okay.
This is definitely the longest interview I've ever done.
Well, no, but it's not the longest one I've done, so it's okay.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I feel embarrassed. I thought this has got to be the longest. Well, it's the longest interview I've ever done anyway, that's for sure. So it's broken my record. I don't think I've ever done it. Like, look at the time.
I know. Don't worry about it.
But it's been a real pleasure to talk to you again anyway, because we go back a long way, and I haven't seen you for years. I have seen you bits and pieces now and again at the con or something, wandering around. But not for a long time.
Yeah, I know. It's just been great to talk to you and talk about all these stories and things I didn't know. And yeah, as you say, like, you know, I was a young whippersnapper and got some lessons off you back in the day. And a lot of those things you were talking about, I still do to this day. In terms of like mouthpieces and overtones, and it's, you know, part of my daily routine. And
oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it's
well, I'm so pleased to hear that. But you know, I do them. Look, I really think they are. It's like, you know, there was one other question you were going to ask about if you had 10 minutes to practice. I remember that's one of the ones that I've heard you do on, because I've watched a couple of the interviews. They're very good too. And you do, I must say, you do these interviews, you know, great. It's really, really good.
Thank you.
But I'm sorry I talk so much. I wish I could shut up. I probably learned that from Joe. You know, Joe would talk for hours and it'd go on forever, and then you'd rattle your brain because you wouldn't know, because it'd be a story. It'd have nothing to do with the saxophone sometimes, or it would, but it'd be so. Then you go away and I go, and then I'd be driving back to New York, and I'd go, I'd have that moment. That's what Joe would mean. And then I'd get back. I could hardly wait to get back to try it, you know. I wonder if I did this, you know. Yeah, so the 10 minutes to practice.
Yeah, so if you only had 10 minutes, what would you practice and why?
The $1 million question. Well, okay. Sometimes you pick the instrument up and it sounds like $1 million. How's this for one? Sometimes you pick the instrument up and it sounds like $1 million. Sometimes you pick the instrument up and it sounds like 50 cents.
It's true.
Well, it's true. For me, sometimes I pick it up and everything feels okay. You know, everything seems to fall into place. And so if I've only got 10 minutes, you know, I can think of doing something other than playing overtones and long notes to get it to sound right. But if it doesn't sound right, that's what I'll do. Otherwise, if it's working, I don't quite question. I don't try and analyze it once I just analyze it if it's not. I try and think, what the hell's going on? Is the reed, you know, this, and reeds do change. We know that. They change like the weather. So that can happen. But a lot of times we feel different. You know, it's like you wake up sometimes and you feel like $1 million, right?
Yeah.
You know, next day it's, you know,
could be having a bad day, or
you could be having a bad day. You don't feel so great, and your concentration is not there, or whatever. Yeah. And so, you know, maybe you've got to take care of things, or I think that would depend on what gig. If you're going to a gig, and you knew that you had to play the flute, I would play the flute. You know, I'd make sure I did that. So there's priorities, but I suppose if it's just 10 minutes and that's all you've got a day, like, you know, that's all they let you do, boy, that's very hard to say. It'd be no good just practicing mouthpiece and exercise and overtones, because no, you wouldn't get to be able to do anything else. But I suppose you know, if your fingers weren't working that day, you know, work on some finger exercises. I suppose it's whatever the priority is, isn't it?
What you got coming up?
That's what I do. But you know, for me, it's mostly getting it to feel right and sound right, getting it to sort of kind of get it so the reed works, because sometimes it'll tell you the reed sounds terrible sometimes when you start. Then all of a sudden it comes to life. You think, is this the same reed? All of a sudden they start sparkling, you know, and you go, wow, that reed, you know, it needs to be played longer sometimes, you know.
They can be temperamental, particularly with all the weather changes and everything too.
No, the weather changes, humidity. Yeah, look, we could go on for hours and I could tell you thousands. When you go on to one thing, I can think of other things, but I won't, because we could be here till 4 o'clock in the morning and it's still
We could be.
the Guinness Book of Records for the longest interview in history.
No,
anyway,
again, thanks so much, Col.
Great, Nathan.
Of last thing, just in terms of like keeping in touch with, you know, what's happening with Col, and you know, maybe checking out some of your albums and things. You have a website which I'll put a link to down here.
There's website. There's somebody's done a Wikipedia.
Yes.
You can look at that? Do you want me to send them to you,
Oh,
or do you?
I've found them, but I was just letting people know that, if they want to find out a bit more about you, you've got your website which has links to your albums there, and
There's albums and there's other stuff, and they can look around if they're interested to have a look. Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. Anyway, no worries. But again,
all right.
Thanks so much for your time,
Nathan.
Col.
Great. Good night.
Good night again. Thanks for
It's
your
been
time.
a pleasure. No, it's been really great. Thanks for having me. I'm honoured to be amongst all the other saxophonists there, and let's hope somebody gets something out of the interview. Anyway, that'd be great if they do.
I'm sure they will. And again, thanks for being a part of it. It's just wouldn't be, you're definitely one of the people that we have to interview. You're just such an icon on the scene. So thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Thanks. All the best.
Okay, all the best, Nathan. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.